It's 12 noon. Actually, it is now 12:02. Calling the meeting of the City of Las Vegas Historic Preservation Commission to order for this December the 11th, 2024. Will the clerk please call the roll and determine if we have a quorum and identify any commissioner that may be on the telephone?
Thank you. Chair Stodel,
Present.
Vice Chair Laramie,
Here.
Commissioner Levine,
Here.
Commissioner Hotchkiss, Commissioner Serfas, Commissioner Cosgrove, Commissioner Palacios, Commissioner Moody, Commissioner Perdue, Commissioner Grimmer, Commissioner Seabrandt, Commissioner Gillespie.
Present.
We do have a quorum, and we were supposed to have one on the phone, but they haven't called in.
Okay, and for the record, Commissioner Mooney is formally was excused.
He is excused, yes.
Agenda item 2 is a question for the clerk regarding the announcement if the Historic Preservation Commission meeting was made in compliance with the state's open meeting law.
Yes, we are in compliance.
Thank you. Agenda item 3 is the first public comment period. Comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. If you wish to be heard, come forward and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed may be limited. Would anybody like to speak at this time? Seeing and hearing none. Agenda item 4 is listed as the chair's announcement relative to the Historic Preservation Commission. This is simply an announcement period, not a discussion or action item. Sadly, as we close this year, we have lost 2 important City of Las Vegas Historic Preservation Commission members. At the Commission's meeting last month, the passing of longtime Nevadan and Las Vegas historian and archaeologist Colleen Beck was placed before this Commission. Later in today's meeting, we will finalize plans to name a new HPC award in honor of Colleen and her work. Last week, the HPC lost another important and passionate board member when Daniel Roberts was removed from the commission. Roberts was appointed to this board by the City Council 2 years ago, with his 4-year term ending in January of 2027. At last week's meeting of the Las Vegas City Council, as part of what the City Council calls the consent agenda, items that are considered routine, agenda item 11 listed Roberts being appointed as the at-large seat for the HPC on January 18th, 2023, and his removal was requested by Ward 3 pursuant to Unified Development Code of the City of Las Vegas, and that is 19.10.150D4, which simply says that members appointed by the City Council can be removed from commissions by the City Council. The consent agenda was approved. There was no discussion regarding Roberts' removal or the reasons why. The placement of the removal of Roberts from the HPC on a routine consent agenda, this is an action that is the first time in the 32-year history of the Historic Preservation Commission that an HPC member has been removed from this commission and is not routine. While his knowledge of construction and historic buildings in downtown Las Vegas and the history of the community of Huntridge, the theater, and Circle Park will be missed from this commission. As a resident of the Huntridge Theater and a leader in the fight to save the historic theater for more than a decade, I'm sure Daniel Roberts' voice will continue to be heard. Next announcement, in June of this year, the chair of the City of Las Vegas Historic Preservation Commission was copied on a letter from the Nevada State Historic Preservation Office to the Clark County School District. The communication from the state agency was in response to a letter the school district had sent the Nevada Historic Preservation Commission requesting that office review the work the school district was doing and its plans for the historic 1930 Las Vegas High School, now a magnet high school, Las Vegas Academy of the Arts. In her response to the school district, Rebecca Palmer, administrator of the Nevada State Historic Preservation Office, questioned why the Clark County School District was asking for a review after the work had already started, and then Palmer added, quote, "The complete demolition of 6 out of the 11 contributing resources in this National Historic District is in direct conflict with the intent of the law, which states that buildings with historic significance and the athletic field on the campus should be preserved." At that point, following receiving the letter, the city's Historic Preservation Commission requested the school district to bring the commission up to date on what the school district was doing regarding the two historic buildings, the main multi-story structure and the gymnasium. Both are on the City of Las Vegas Historic Register, and any proposed exterior changes need to come before this commission for approval. The Clark County School District responded and came before the HPC on September 25th with a full report on what was taking place and plans for the historic site. It was a detailed report from Brandon McLaughlin, Assistant Superintendent of the Clark County School District, Wade Simpson, the architect was Simpson Cutler, Chris Dingle, Director of Property Management for the school district, and Courtney Mooney, the Senior Architectural Historian with Broadbent and Associates, hired to advise the school district regarding the historic site. The entire school district team provided this board with updates and concluded with the school district's commitment to provide both updates regularly to this board and to follow the proper procedures regarding the two buildings which the city has specific responsibilities. This past week, the chair of the City of Las Vegas HPC was copied on a letter dated November 22nd, 24. This is in response from the Clark County School District to the communication to the Nevada Preservation Office that Rebecca Palmer sent in June. The school district's correspondence, which includes a PowerPoint presentation, the one that was seen by this commission, was sent to Robin Reed, who is the acting director of SHPO. After serving the state of Nevada for more than 30 years, including over a decade as head of the State Historic Preservation Office, Rebecca Palmer, at the end of August of this year, retired. The letter to Ms. Reed, the acting director, reads as follows. Dear Ms. Reed, the correspondence is in response to a letter received by Rebecca Palmer, the former administrator and State Historic Preservation Officer, dated June 14, 2024. The letter from Ms. Palmer provided comments on a report submitted to SHPO outlining the development plans for the Las Vegas campus. The report was submitted to SHPO in compliance with the Nevada Revised Statute 383.121. In her letter, Ms. Palmer, A, requested information regarding the status of Phase 1, 2, and 3, and B, recommended that the school district seek counsel regarding Senate Bill 63 and its implications for this project. Regarding A, please see the attached PowerPoint presentation provided to the city's Historic Preservation Commission on September 25th. The presentation outlines the most recent construction phasing schedule. Regarding B, the District Council for the Clark County School District has interpreted Senate Bill 23 that if the state legislature intended the property of the historic field in the buildings, they would have explicitly stated such and not simply restricted the sale or the lease of its buildings. Our office reached out to you on September the 13th and September the 8th to invite you to discuss the June 18th letter. To date, we have not received a response. As such, we consider the non-response from your office as concurrence to our position. Signed, Brendan McLaughlin, the Assistant Superintendent of the Clark County School District. This commission looks forward to an update from the school district as promised early next year. The third announcement, a two-day end-of-the-year meeting last week, December 5th and 6th in Boulder City. The Nevada Board of Museums and History reviewed two nomination forms to the National Register approved earlier this year by the City of Las Vegas HPC. The first is the National Register of Historic Places Multiple Property Documentation Form associated with the history of Latinos in Nevada, 1864 to 2000. The second nomination approved by this commission is the National Register of Historic Places, Culinary Local 226, headquarter building in the City of Las Vegas. And while the Nevada State Board and SHPO approved the nomination of the culinary building and sent it to the keeper in Washington, D.C. for final approval, the State Board did not approve the draft of the National Register of Historic Multiple Property Form for historic places associated with Latinos, Hispanics in Nevada, again, 1864 to 2000. And that document contains a very significant section in references to Las Vegas. The State Board did not reject the draft, but voted to delay the matter, allowing the State Board of Museum and History several months to review the statewide nomination. The nomination will be heard on March the 7th, 2025, on the agenda of the State Board of Museums and History. They'll meet in Carson City. A copy of the draft that they're reviewing and the one that was approved by the commission is currently available on the Nevada Board of Museums, History, and website. Finally, I'm very pleased to announce the appointment of a new member of the city's Historic Preservation Commission, Misty Rose Grimmer. City Council member Olivia Diaz recommended Ms. Grimmer to this commission. The mayor and city council agreed, and Ms. Grimmer, as of about 40 minutes ago, is now a full-fledged voting member of this commission, where she was sworn in, filling the at-large position. Currently, she serves as Vice President of Public Affairs at the Ferraro Group, and before that with Robert Ostrowski's company before it merged into the Ferraro Group. Both the Ferraro and the Ostrowski Company are well known throughout the state of Nevada as highly respected organizations working in government affairs. Ms. Grimmer serves in several leadership capacities with the company. She is responsible for researching and representing the interests of her clients to the Nevada legislature and Nevada's regulatory bodies, which have included in the past such clients as Cox Communications, the Nevada Reward Association, and the City of Las Vegas. As a native of Nevada, her bachelor's is in political science from UNLV, and she brings her passion for history preservation to this commission, partly from the Nevada Preservation Foundation, where she serves as treasurer. Welcome. Quick question before we move on. What attracted you to joining HPC?
Thank you, Chair Stodall and committee members. I'm proud to be joining the committee, and I'm nervous, and hope I can contribute to the efforts of the commission. So I've lived, as Chair Stodall mentioned, I'm a native of Nevada, and I've lived in the city of Las Vegas since 2003, and I've lived downtown in the Southridge neighborhood since 2013. And when I first moved downtown, I met up with Heidi Swank, of course, through the legislative process, and then we became quick friends, and she invited me to be part of the inaugural board of the Nevada Preservation Foundation. Also, as Chair Stodall mentioned, our firm has represented the city of Las Vegas. I think our time frame that we represented the city was almost 20 years. And in fact, I don't remember, was it 2007 or 9 when Seth was part of our city team. And so, yeah, long history with the city of Las Vegas. And now as a member of downtown and having lived in the downtown community for a while, very much in preserving the character and the historic nature of the downtown, and also the rest of the city too. It's not just downtown that's historic. I'm an avid user of our public lands and all of our cultural resources, including, as a matter of disclosure and pride, one of our current clients is the Mob Museum, and so I'm doing a lot of stuff to try to help them succeed and expand. They've got great big plans, and it's going to be good. Thank you.
That sounds wonderful. That's on so many different levels. It's a wonderful added voice to this board. One more note on today's agenda. We're moving up agenda items 10 and items 11 separately. They'll move up to in front of the 9th item on the agenda. With those announcements, we move to the next item, which is the minutes of Las Vegas, the minutes of the HPC for possible action. Approve the final minutes by reference of our regular meeting of the city's HPC on October the 23rd, 2024. Any corrections, clarifications, or amendments to the 12 pages of minutes? If not, look for a motion to approve.
This is Commissioner Cosgrove. I move that we approve the October 2024 minutes as presented.
We have a motion. General public comments? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Do we have anybody on the phone yet? We do not. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with the chair voting with those in attendance. Let's move on to agenda item number 6, 24-0546-HPC1. This is an advance item. Report by Nathan Harper, Southern Nevada Water Authority's architecturologist, regarding updates on the Springs Preserve and the Las Vegas Valley Water District. Welcome. Dr. Seabrad, do you want any further introductions, or should we let Nathan move forward?
Let Nathan move forward.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Stoddall. Thank you, Commissioners. I always enjoy coming before this commission to update you on our activities at the Springs Preserve and with the Las Vegas Valley Water District. My name is Nathan Harper. I serve as the archaeologist for the Southern Nevada Water Authority, and that includes responsibilities for the Las Vegas Valley Water District and the Springs Preserve and all of our properties here in Southern Nevada. So I'm going to update you on a couple projects that we have brought before the HPC before in the past. The well derricks that are on the property there at the Springs Preserve are part of a historic water infrastructure that dates back to the 1940s. We have water infrastructure go back to the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. These well derricks were drilled mostly in the 1940s and erected in the 1940s. And rather than pull them down, the idea was to leave them in place so those wells could be serviced over time. They were originally restored in 1999 for 3 of the well derricks on site were restored in 1999. 1 was not restored then. In 2016, we received a Centennial grant, a planning grant, and we brought in Mel Green to do an evaluation of the well derricks and develop a plan for us on that. Originally, these were going to be restored and put back together in the fall of 2021. We all remember what happened then. So this project was delayed, and I want to give you some updates on what we were able to do. We were able to, this project was paid out of capital, out of LVPWD capital, and we brought in a contractor to stabilize, to evaluate this structure to determine which members needed to be replaced, which members needed to be stabilized. We brought in new hardware, custom hardware was constructed to match the original hardware for the well derricks. We matched color on the paint to match the original paint colors. And the biggest part of this restoration project was well derrick number 5. Now this is the one, as you drive down the highway and you go past the Springs Preserve, you see the Fox and the Roadrunner and the Gila Monster coming over the wall there. If you look at that wall, that well derrick number 5 is the one that's farthest to the north. It's the one that's most visible from the highway. That's the one that looked like it was leaning over, the one that looked like it was twisted and could fall over at any moment. This was something that I looked at every morning driving into work to make sure it was still standing there. So well derrick number 5 had specific issues because it sat in the subsidence zone. And part of what we do at the Las Vegas Valley Water District and at the Springs Preserve specifically is to talk about conservation and conservation programming and messaging about how we have overused resources in the past. And this well derrick was very important because of that subsidence zone. The wellhead was hung up 5 feet above the ground surface. So we wanted to preserve that wellhead, we wanted to preserve that subsidence in that location because we want to tell that story about overconsumption, right? So we were able to do that. We lifted the well derrick off of its original footings. We built temporary footings and moved the well derrick with a crane about 50 foot over, dropped it on that temporary footings, installed new concrete footings, restored that wellhead and the piping in that location, and moved it back into place. So the 4 well derricks at the Springs Preserve are now stabilized, solid, and they look really good, I would say, and really excited to have that project completed. One of our other major projects that we've been doing over the last 2 years is we had an appropriation from the state of Nevada to develop a dedicated ethnobotanical garden celebrating the ecological knowledge of the Southern Paiute peoples and other tribal members here in Southern Nevada. We've named this garden the Nuwu Passats with our consultants. We've worked very closely with the consultants from Las Vegas Valley Paiute Tribe, the Mawapa Band of Paiutes, and Pahrump Paiute, members from Pahrump Paiute Tribe as well. So the garden is dedicated to the indigenous knowledge of all the people of Southern Nevada. The theme is the land provides for us all. On each of our interpretive panels that we see throughout the garden, each header is in Southern Paiute language, phonetically spelled in Southern Paiute language. Each plant, each animal is identified in Southern Paiute language. One of the exciting things, and I think probably one of the more important things, is we're going to have a QR code on those panels, and you'll be able to scan that QR code, and it will bring you to a page where you're going to hear a Paiute elder speaking those words. So you'll be able to hear and understand Southern Paiute language and be able to understand how it's pronounced. We're particularly excited about that because the elder that's speaking for us, his name is Leroy Howell. He is a direct descendant of John Howell, who was the first government-sanctioned landowner of the springs there. So we're currently finishing up small cultural constructions. We're going to build some kani, some roasting pits, some storage pits, sort of as examples of traditional lifeways here in Southern Nevada. We're finishing that up right now. We're trying to get that wrapped up, and we're looking for an opening event sometime in the spring on this one. Here's some examples of some of our panels that we're going to have in there, some examples of the words and the images. We worked with Aldrich Pears and Associates. If you know Aldrich Pears, they've been doing quite a bit of work here in Southern Nevada, and we're very, very happy with the work that we received from them. As part of this program, we received a grant from the San Manuel tribe to do a speaker series there at the Springs Preserve. We brought in Native and Indigenous speakers from around the western United States, from Northern Nevada, from Arizona. We had, to wrap up the speakers event, we had a panel discussion with our tribal consultants and the project managers, and we had about 80 people in attendance for that one. It was a very positive time. And finally, there's some other projects that's going on that we're pursuing here in Southern Nevada. We just presented this morning to the trails program for the state. We're asking for a grant to redo our trails inside the Cienega. There's also a large-scale program that's being proposed by SNWA to offer low-cost and no-cost septic to sewer conversion programs throughout the county. So we are trying to work through that. We're trying to develop an agreement with the SHPO and the EPA programmatic agreement to make sure that we're going to be able to move forward with that. I'm happy to answer any questions the commission might have. Thank you very much.
Questions, comments, thoughts? Please.
Are any of those wells still pumping?
None of the wells that are under the derricks are operational. Those wells have been abandoned in place, but there are other working wells at the Springs Preserve site, modern wells with modern pumps and equipment.
On the Springs Preserve?
Yes.
How many?
Gosh, we got about 8 out there, eight functioning wells, and these are production wells, but also recharge wells as well. So we're taking water out of the ground, but we're also putting water back in the ground in the aquifer there.
Nathan, one of the, I don't know if you can go back, but one of the great sites where folks were taking photographs, selfies, was at the subsidence. Mm-hmm. Did I see a slide here that showed the subsidence?
Yeah, bottom middle there, you see the new footings.
Right.
For that, and that chunk of concrete on that wellhead, that is the subsidence zone there. So we restored it back to the the subsided ground surface, and that wellhead is still located about 5 feet above the ground.
I thought I saw a photo of that after.
We did have some social media.
Okay.
Out there, and we did have some short videos and pieces on social media.
Because the leaning and the subsidence was just a story, a great, but you decided to go up straight rather than to put a little bit of a lean in there?
Yeah, we wanted to make sure it was stable. There was some of the concerns when we had Mel Green come in and do it. He said that this is old wood, it's under a lot of stress. If we keep it in that position, it might fail. So we wanted to make sure it was stabilized and standing.
Yeah, it was just a great story. I mean, you just saw the story. The other one is, I think, some hats off to the idea with a QR code and having the senior member of the tribe speak. I mean, signs are great and they're wonderful and they're important that they're factually correct, but they're signs in just a few words. But to hear that, that was a wonderful addition to that. Do you have any sense? I know the Springs Preserve works very closely with the tribes here in the valley and Moapa, but do you have a sense of what the population is? And is the preferred term N-U-W-U, is that rather than Southern Paiutes?
Yeah, so Nuwu Nuwuvi is their ethnonym. That is the name they've given themselves, right? And like any other name that people give themselves, it just means the people. So the Nuwu Nuwuvi are the people here in Southern Nevada. So the Nuwu Passats, we literally translate as the people's garden or the people's field.
And the population roughly, do you have a sense?
Population is small. It's been small, Las Vegas, Moapa, those others. And I know that there's been an effort for enrollment for the Las Vegas tribe. So there's some movement on that.
Further questions, comments, please?
Just a comment, Commissioner Surface. Just want to thank you, Nathan, and the good folks at the Springs Preserve. You hosted a meeting for us with the Urban Land Institute, and it was very well received, and folks toured the preserve afterwards. Folks were attending that meeting from all over the world, actually, and they were amazed by everything going on there at the preserve. So kudos for your efforts, and keep sailing forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look forward to your continued work in this area.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 24-0619-HPC1, report by the Community Development Department regarding the City of Las Vegas 2025 Master Plan. Community Development Department will provide an update on the City of Las Vegas plan, and specifically as it regards to historic preservation.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Mr. Chairman. Seth Floyd for the record. I'm going to be very brief, and I'm going to turn it over to Marco. You all know Marco. He has been here a number of times over the years to report on our master plan and all things that are going on the historic preservation part of that. But I wanted to set the stage real quick. I have been back at the city for my second tour for about 7 years now, and I was sitting in Paul's seat for a little while. And one thing that has definitely trended the right direction and upward over those 7 years is the importance of historic preservation as part of our overall city master plan. And that's reflected not only in what Marco's going to talk about, which is what the plan says and how we're achieving the goals there, but also in the fact that we now have a dedicated staff person who does historic preservation, staffs this commission, works with the Centennial Commission. So we've expended more resources, we've added more properties to the register. Marco is here, and he usually comes back at least once a year to talk about the master plan, because one of the things we do under that plan is we report to council annually on our progress under the plan, and Marco just did that recently in the fall. And we wanted to also come to you and tell you more specifically about what's in the plan that relates to you and give you an update on all that work that we're doing. So with that, I'll turn it over to Marco, and then we'll answer any questions that you have at the end or throughout.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Marco Valletta, City of Las Vegas, Department of Community Development for the record. I think Seth made a pretty good intro, but I did want to provide you a little bit of context for this item here. So the master plan is this document here that I'm holding in front of you. It's available on our website at masterplan.vegas. And the plan itself is that guide for the city. It prepares us for change over time and decision-making by the Planning Commission and City Council. Aside from just individual entitlement cases, it covers a wide spectrum of different topics. And state and local planning laws have been around for about 100 years. The city planning commissions themselves been around since 1921, before NRS was a thing. Nevada revised statutes, when that did come about, there was a chapter on planning and zoning that came about in 1941. If you're interested in the history of city planning, I'd encourage you to take a look at this. This is the birth of city planning in the United States from 1840 to 1917, kind of talks about planning itself and zoning, if that's of interest. The term zoning and planning are sometimes used interchangeably, but they are two distinct different things, and zoning is really kind of that implementation action that authorizes a city, a county, or a planning commission the authority to divide land uses up into different districts or overlays, as the case may be for historic preservation purposes within the city of Las Vegas. The first city plan that we've had was around in 1959, as well as a zoning code. This was the general land use plan that was adopted by the city and its Board of Commissioners at that time. And really it covered the spectrum of things that were required under that 1941 NRS requirement from everything related to land use, to transportation, to housing and things of that nature. And so this showed really where the residential and the commercial and industrial locations of the city were going to be, as well as the construction of what would eventually be I-15, something that was happening in the 1950s as a result of the Interstate Highway Act. Our current master plan was adopted in 2021, and we give annual reports to the Planning Commission and City Council on the overall implementation. And we've gone through this 3 times with them thus far, and we provided them a little bit of an update for a lot of the different things that, that are required, whether that's historic preservation itself or other topics that might be of import, like housing, economic development, education, infrastructure, the other things that are spoken to as far as master plan requirements. So on the land use side, as it pertains to historic preservation, I did want to cover a couple things because there is a direct relation and a pathway that we have outlined in Title 19. The land use element of the 2050 plan does provide that direction for the city on infill and redevelopment and trying to counterbalance some of the development pressures we have, especially in downtown and on major arterials and along some of the major neighborhoods that are immediately surrounding downtown, and trying not to, have development encroach into neighborhoods that might be historic in nature or have some age in them. We want to make sure that we have the ability to develop and redevelop, as we have done throughout downtown and in Symphony Park and the medical district. Those are good things for economic development purposes and for revitalization, but at the same time, there's also a desire to respect some of the houses and structures that are within some of those same neighborhoods and try to make sure that where there are opportunities for development, they're thoughtfully planned for, and if there's opportunities for things like adaptive reuse, that we take advantage of them. So zoning, again, we have a section within the master plan that talks about what is authorized in terms of individual districts. I'm sure many of you are familiar with them, but essentially we have the residential, commercial, and industrial zoning districts, and those all must be consistent with the land use plan that is adopted. Zoning itself has the explicit requirements with respect to uses, for heights, for setbacks, parking, those types of things, and those are the legal requirements that an applicant has to go through. And R1, as an example, this is from our Title 19 zoning district. You can kind of see here that all of those different requirements are met. We also have overlay standards, and that's where historic preservation comes into play, and that's how Title 19 sets out the process for going through this commission and then ultimately through Planning Commission and City Council. This is our general plan. This sets out where all those land uses are, and then the compatible zoning districts that align with those land uses. So in other words, for a low density residential designation, you're only allowed to have zoning that is applicable to that particular category. So R1 zoning district goes in the low density residential category. High density residential, you could have R3 or R4 zoning, and that would be that would go in the high density category. So again, all of that is supposed to match up with each other. The overlay, though, does have applicability through that process that's laid out. One of the elements that's required in the master plan is historic preservation, and this has been around for a number of years, and we are one of the cities in the state of Nevada that carries out a number of the things that are contemplated within NRS. So for historic preservation, we have within the 2050 master plan, this inventory of historic neighborhoods and ages of different structures throughout the city, whether they were built in the, pre-1930s all the way up to the 2010s, and now we're looking at the 2020s in terms of decades in which structures were constructed. We obviously have an established Historic Preservation Commission, and we have a number of goals and methods that encourage historic preservation. Those are the basic requirements for historic preservation. In terms of the preservation inventory, again, a lot of things that are discussed in the master plan are you'll find there. We have an entire inventory. Every time something comes through this commission, we update the master plan and add new properties and their historical significance. Sometimes we have things that are of archaeological significance or paleontological or architectural significance. Things like the Spanish Trail, things like Tule Springs, those are all things that could be contemplated, and in our case, we have included them in that overall inventory, and we update it and add to it as cases come through this board. The overall goal outlined in the master plan is that we preserve and reuse historic sites and structures, and that overall the long-term outcomes that we want to see over time as we're implementing the plan is an increase in historic sites and districts, and that the number of structures that we have added or rehabilitated or restored or adaptively reused increases over time, and we have seen that happen. So those actions that we can take are really, first and foremost are a responsibility of this commission, and Dr. Seabrand has obviously done a tremendous job at continuing on that progress and that momentum. There has been a wide range of education on the value of preservation, and again, we're trying to balance both redevelopment and preservation efforts because the two kind of go hand in hand. We're trying to contemplate how we improve the city while at the same time preserving its history. In the 2024 annual report that Seth had mentioned, and I had mentioned earlier, we did report to City Council that we have 5 districts that are officially established. We just added 2 new properties to the Historic Property Register, although we had another one that was kind of coming in at the beginning of last year, the end of last year, beginning of this year. We had some surveys that were completed for East Las Vegas and Twin Lakes, and a grant program established for historic residential neighborhoods. There are these and other things that are discussed in the 2050 plan that we are enabled to do and we can continue on, but again, this is ultimately the historic preservation element for the city of Las Vegas, and we're one of the few cities in the state of Nevada that have really kind of taken this some of these requirements or some of the things that were specifically outlined here and in the previous plans and really put them into effect. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Questions, comments? First of all, thank you. It's an important document. Just a couple of questions on sort of the procedure and process. Notice that it was amended. So is there a formal, and what would require a preservation plan or a master plan to be amended as opposed to simply being part of an annual report?
Sure. So again, Marco Vallata for the record. Mr. Chair, the process is outlined in Title 19. Anytime an amendment to the plan as a whole or an individual element is changed, we do a general plan amendment. That process is outlined in Title 19. It's the same for actually changing a land use designation as well. So you go to Planning Commission, and then it goes on to City Council after that. And we usually do 1 or 2 of those types of amendments per year, whereas individual land use changes happen no more than 4 times a year, and those are typically on a quarterly basis.
Has there been any, in regards to anything dealing, when you word search the master plan, you come up with 181 uses of the word historic, and some of those are historic events and so forth, but there's a great deal of history within the master plan and different uses, and it was exciting to see that move forward. The annual reports, are those also available on the website?
Yes, they are, masterplan.vegas.
And I haven't taken advantage of reading those, but are there any changes that deal with historic preservation or that this group should be informed with? And is there a process that if there are changes that we could be alerted to the potential changes?
Yeah, so again, Mr. Chair, the easiest explanation for how the long-term outcomes improve is the action done by the Historic Preservation Officer and the Historic Preservation Commission. So if there are activities that are done, or if an applicant wants to put a property on a registry or something like that happens, that's going to move the needle for you.
Okay.
Or there could be individual studies or things like that that could be done or taken throughout the year, as was done with East Las Vegas, Charleston Heights, Twin Lakes. That all can help contribute to the overall designation of new properties and help improve things with respect to preservation efforts.
Mr. Chairman, Seth Floyd for the record. If your question was, as in the past year, have we made an amendment to the plan that affects historic preservation? The answer is no, we've not amended this year any portion of the plan that relates to historic preservation or the goals that Marco laid out.
Right, and the second part of that question was, would we be alerted, the HPC be alerted before there's a proposal to amend it regarding historic preservation, would we be alerted in advance of that or just simply informed?
I think it would be, I'll have to go back to your overlay. I think it would be required that we come to you first before we made that amendment based on the authority that you have in Title 19.
Great, thank you. And my last question is, many of us, or it was available to the public, received the draft of the Kyle Canyon proposal, which is very interesting and very detailed. Are there any historic preservation elements within that? I think it's 80+ pages long, charts and graphs and photographs and so forth. Anything that this commission should be aware of regarding Kyle Canyon is a historic place. So I was wondering what the city is thinking about that in regards to the filter of historic preservation.
Sure. Again, Marco Vallata for the record. So, Mr. Chair, the city itself is divided into 16 different areas, which we've been doing special area planning on for individual pieces, like downtown Las Vegas, East Las Vegas. And it just so happens that we're now at the end of the process for doing Kyle Canyon, which is the far northwest. After doing, some of the environmental study as part of the 2050 plan, there's not a lot of architectural things out there. I mean, most of it is pretty much, not developed. At least a good quarter of it is, and then the other 3/4 are existing development. There are certainly paleontological resources out there. We know that with the Tule Springs National Monument. That's not necessarily in the same area that we're looking at, but we are aware that they're there. The one thing that is that is of note is the Las Vegas and Tonopah railroad bed. That is the alignment for the railroad between downtown Las Vegas and Tonopah itself is basically to the east of US 95, and it goes all the way up paralleling it at that point. It goes right through a location where we have the Northwest Regional Park, and then if you were to continue following it, you'd wind up in where the golf courses are for the Las Vegas Paiute tribe. The park itself is going to preserve that railroad bed itself, as well as the Y, which is kind of a siding where the trains would load and unload timber from Mount Charleston that was harvested And that area itself has been identified and would be targeted for preservation.
Please.
Commissioner Laramie, for the record, I had a question about one of the goals that was there about a historic district for every 100,000 residents, I think it said. And I'm just wondering how that, I guess, number was developed. Where is that like a best practice standard from other cities, or how was that created?
So, Commissioner Laramie, Marco Vallata, for the record, we have as we were developing the 2050 plan, at the same time we were going through it, we were pursuing Lead for Cities certification. And a lot of the outcomes that are in the 2050 plan are a part of the credit categories that were a part of the certification process. So historic preservation was one of those elements that were part of the USGBC standard that we were pursuing, or its immediate predecessor that fed into Lead for Cities. And that is where that explicit 100,000 residents, a district ratio essentially came about. And we use that because that's something that's going to be common for any other city across the country that is also pursuing a similar designation. It's really just a measure to see how well you're doing in terms of trying to preserve areas for the size of city that you have.
I see. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to comment on that because it honestly to me seems kind of low. It is good to know where it's coming from, but just thinking about that, the population of Las Vegas is 600-something thousand, so that would be 6-point-something districts.
Right.
And we've been working as a commission to add more districts, and I think that the similar feeling up here is that we don't have enough, and so being that we're already at 5, it feels low to me, but thank you for clarifying where it's coming from.
Further questions, comments?
Yeah, Commissioner Surface, Marco, thank you for the report and all the tremendous strides made. I've been on the commission for 13 years and really turning the tide here. I just had a question. You mentioned that balancing act of redevelopment and preservation. And I just, I'm very pleased with the goals and the planning efforts. Would it be possible to report back to us with some strategies to possibly assist in going forward to work on that balancing act, where we could maybe endorse some of these strategies and help them go up the political approval process to make preservation and redevelopment a really accomplished goal?
Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Surface, yes, we can take a look at that. Yeah.
Thank you, Marco.
Further questions? Seeing and hearing none, again, one last thank you. And appreciate all the work, and do understand the balancing act, and sometimes we know where it tips, and what we keep moving forward, and there are important steps that have been successfully taken. Some hard work on the part of the city's historic preservation officer to move these things forward. So, and we thank you for all your work. We also thank you for your next appearance, which I hope is real soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the next agenda item, which is number 8, 24-0620-HPC1, discussion for possible action regarding approval of the second draft of the updated National Register of Historic Places nomination for the Las Vegas Old Mormon Fort located at 500 West Avenue. This commission funded $29,000 to update the report that I believe was done in 1960, 66 maybe it was, but it was really an outdated report. Dr. Seaborn, I'm going to let you follow up and introduce our consultant.
Thank you. Seabrant for the record. So this is the second draft. Everybody on the commission has been given the opportunity to review and comment on the first draft, which we gave those comments to the consultant, and she and her team were able to incorporate those comments. And the second draft has been submitted, and we already did receive some comments back regarding the second draft, so thank you. And then if anybody has further comments on the second draft, please state them today or send them to me in an email, and I'll get them to our consultant, Zoanne Campana, with Katz Environmental, and I will let her take it from here. Thank you.
Welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me today. Zoanne Campana from Katz Environmental, for the record. And yeah, I'm really just here to collect any additional feedback that you have on the second draft. Some changes that you may have noticed between the drafts. We made those language changes when referencing the Nuuvi and Latter-day Saints, like we discussed at the last meeting. We also added some maps of the site and the resources on the site during the different periods of occupation, as you know, best as we know them. And finally, we beefed up the historic context a little bit, especially in reference to the Stewart Ranch period, and also adding a little bit about the military use of the site between the missionary period and sort of bleeding into that gas ranch period.
Questions, comments? The chair sent out some notes and some comments, copied the city historic preservation officer as well as the consultant and this board. Are there any questions regarding those proposed changes? If not, I would look for a motion to, well, first, let me back up. I want to say personally, I want to say thank you, yes, personally, but also for the HPC for all the hard work that you clearly put into this document. And it is a document. One of the things that the HPC has been doing in updating these nominations, the first ones were done with the right spirit, and got the historic sites on the register, but that was a couple, 3 decades ago. This document improves it, makes corrections, and it's our goal on the HPC to clearly have a second role for these things, because they already have a second role, and they become primary sources, and they become the documents that people quote from. And so the added responsibility of not just getting on the National Register, this one's going to fly through, but it's also its use after that. And this one clearly does a fantastic job in that. But I would look for a motion, since the chair does not make a motion, to move this document forward, this nomination forward, with the submitted corrections and updates.
I'll make a motion, Commissioner Surface, to move it forward with the revisions, and great job. Thank you.
We have a motion. We don't need a second. Is there further discussion? General public, anything you want to add?
No, I mean, just that it's been a joy to work on this project, and I appreciate all of your comments and, you know, anything to make this the best that it can be for, you know, being listed in the National Register. So thank you for the opportunity.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to take about a 2-minute break. Do we have any water available anywhere? There's one behind me. It said Mayor Goodman. Yes, it is. Thank you. But thank you.
Microphone, Bob.
Our next item on the agenda is item 10. This is an action item. As the agenda memo states, it's a possible action item following discussion regarding the question of whether the Dapper Company, owners of the historic Hundreds Theater located at 1208 East Charleston Boulevard, has used reasonable diligence to cause significant progress toward rehabilitation of the historic property located in the Las Vegas City Council Chambers, Diaz Ward 3. According to the agenda memo, city staff recommends approval of this item and has provided the commission with 4 important pieces of backup documentation to help the commission understand the issue. A brief review of the background that brings this to the HPC. In October of 2020, Las Vegas City Council, the state of Nevada, the owners of the Hundreds, and the buyers of the Hundreds signed a legal agreement covering the oversight of the historic theater. This agreement is part of the commission's packet. That agreement went into effect in March of 2021 when the transfer of ownership was finalized. Within that agreement are legal duties of the city of Las Vegas, the legal duties of the HPC, and the legal obligations of the owners of the Hundreds. The legal agreement was signed by all parties, calls on the owners of the Hundreds to make public reports 4 times a year. They are also responsible for repairing and maintaining the historic fabric of the theater, both inside and out. The legal requirements also calls for the owners to report, as I said, 4 times a year, that they have, quote, exercise reasonable diligence to cause significant progress towards rehabilitation of the Hundreds Theater according to the standards for rehabilitation 36 CFR 67, including but not limited to the following architectural elements of the Hundreds: the original part of the 1944 construction exterior walls, the marquee as it presently exists after 1980 and 1983 renovations, the monument sign, and 4, the interior configuration of the lobby and theater spaces. Also, the following question needs to be answered: has the owner exercised maintenance and repair of the Hundreds to preserve the architectural, historical, and cultural integrity, continued maintenance and repair to preserve those things which make it historically significant? The Hundreds owners also allow inspection by the city of Las Vegas at least twice a year, which will be reported for the HPC. Here's the key part. According to the legal settlement, quote, failure to exercise reasonable diligence to rehabilitate the Hundreds Theater as required by this agreement will constitute a material breach of this agreement. On the other hand, as part of the settlement agreement between all parties, a $389,925 judgment by a district court judge based on the failures of the previous owners to maintain the property, and it's included in the sales agreement, still stands. This agreement says the Historic Preservation Commission, quote, at its sole and absolute discretion, can reduce that amount of the $389,000 judgment each year by $38,992.50 if the Hundreds owners have met their legal obligations listed in the settlement agreement. As I say, that settlement agreement lists the obligations, and they started in March of 2021. So far, the Hundreds Theater owners have not applied for financial relief from the judgment. However, on today's agenda are 2 items filed by the city seeking that the judgment be reduced, in this case for item 10, for the first 3 years. In connection with the settlement agreement, the city staff has been working hard to create a process, including a clear calendar of events, to make this an annual process for the Hundreds owners, the city of Las Vegas, and the HPC and the public, that makes it understandable and details the dates and events that are required in the legal agreement. Moreover, as chair, I commend the staff and think we have a clear path for the coming year regarding the historic theater. The challenge facing the commission today is whether it has enough information to confirm that the owners of hunters have fulfilled all the obligations required in the legal agreement for the past 3 and a total of 4 years to reduce the judgment by $100,000. Since we all received the commission agenda and the backup material this past week, it includes an overview of the materials the hunterage owners have presented to the commission in the past 3 years, 3 years plus. While there are some gaps, including a couple of missing quarterly reports over the 3 years, based in large part on the material furnished by the city, I think that the owners of the hunterage have made a good faith effort to meet the legal requirements of the settlement agreement and will support a motion if one is made to approve the city staff's recommendation. I will also support the agenda item because of the detailed and precise plans the city has created to move forward in 2025, which, as I said, focuses on all the legal obligations of the HPC, the city, and the Hunterage Theater owners. With that, I'd like to start the presentation by the City of Las Vegas. Dr. Seabrand?
Thank you. I'm Diane Seabrand, for the record, Historic Preservation Officer for the city. So thank you for that introduction, Chairman Stodel. You took away a lot of my talking points, so this will be a repeat of what was just said. So we all know the Hunterage Theater. This is how it looked in 1944. We don't have a color picture, so we are going by what we're seeing here, and this is part of the agreement as far as the restoration. So the settlement agreement and mutual release does require the owner to exercise reasonable diligence to cause the significant progress towards the rehabilitation, allow the inspections of the theaters and the quarterly reports. In this presentation, we'll cover those items. Now, I know there's been several conversations and some confusion about what the responsibilities are of this board. So hopefully this is going to clarify what we're voting on today. So what we're voting on today is to determine if the owner has exercised reasonable diligence to cause significant progress towards rehabilitation of the following. And this is for when the property was first purchased in March 2021 through the end of 2023. And those are the original exterior walls, the marquee, the signs, and the lobby and theater spaces. So the following images, so I actually arrived here in late 2019, and one of my first visits was out to the theater. So even though he was not, it was not under the ownership of Dapper Companies during 2019, I included those images so you could see what it looked like in 2019 as compared to today. So the original 1944 exterior walls, image from 2020, 2021 to 2024. As you can see the image from 2020, there is different paint colors. There are some, I think it used to get a lot of graffiti, and the graffiti would be covered over. And then in 2024, you can see the difference of 2020, 2021, and 2024. And the marquee and key is as it presently exists after the 1980 and 1993 renovations, as well as the monument signs. And you can see this series of images from 2019 until 2023. And as Chairman Stodel said, these images were provided in the backup, so hopefully everybody's had the opportunity to look them over and make your decision if the progress has been made. And the next one is the interior configuration of the lobby, again, as it looked in 2019 up until 2022. And again, hopefully everybody was able to look at this and determine if progress was made. And then we have the interior configuration of the theater spaces. The first one is the main theater. I believe Chairman Stodel was on the site visit with me in 2022 or 2020, I can't remember now. But as far as all these images taken, these were all at site visits. So the site visit requirement is incorporated within these images as well. And then also the interior configuration of the theater spaces. This is the basement of the theater. Again, you can see the difference between from 2019 until 2022, and it doesn't look different right now. And this isn't part of the historic structure itself, and it's not part of, it's not on the register, but just wanted to show you the two buildings that were added at a later date. In 1948, there was a bank building added. Afterwards, it was used for storage, and again, you see the difference from 2019 into how it looks today. And then the second building that was a later addition was the 1958 post office. And again, from 2019 to as it looked 2022. As Chairman Stodel mentioned, so the previous quarterly reports, yes, some of those were missed. That was on our end as far as not being able to reach out in a timely manner. But these are all the quarterly reports that were given for 2021 through 2024. And then this is the 2025 schedule. So this was discussed at our last meeting, not as a action item, but as an item to see what the schedule would be for the next year. Dapper Companies was provided the schedule, and they agreed to adhere to the schedule. And here you see where we have the quarterly reports from the owner, the on-site inspections, and then the reports back to the commission. So I will turn it over to Director Floyd first before questions.
Yeah, thank you, Diane. Seth Floyd for the record. And I think between the chairman and Diane, they've covered the nuts and bolts of what these two items that are on the agenda cover. I wanted to emphasize, though, at the end of Chairman Stodol's comments, he mentioned that one of the important things about your role is that we establish a schedule going forward, recognizing that we have not been as organized, and that's both us and the staff and the property owner, in making sure those reports have happened at that quarterly basis, giving you the information you need at the end of each year to make a decision about whether, and I always forget this standard, reasonable diligence has been exercised, and I meant to make a cheat sheet for that, but Diane, we can go back and read it and get it accurate. But the point is that for next year, we have a schedule. Those items will be placed on agendas following those reports, and you will have the opportunity then, with full information and full reports at your disposal, to make decisions about whether he has exercised reasonable diligence to cause significant progress, there we go, towards rehabilitation in that particular year. And the importance of that is, in the settlement agreement, if you make that determination, there is a schedule for how, under the covenants that are part of that agreement, how the penalty gets reduced by a certain amount for each year that he does exercise that the property owner exercises that reasonable diligence. So hopefully that clarifies your role, and hopefully you have enough information, and more importantly, will have the requisite information going forward each year from now on. I will tell you, from staff's perspective, our goal after our conversation on this last time was to put in front of you what we have, as Diane said, from the beginning of the settlement agreement through today, to help you make a decision on that, and then start fresh going forward next year. So that's our goal, is to give you that information, answer any questions you have, and then be a little bit more organized following the schedule for next year.
Thank you. Questions, comments, please?
Commissioner Surface, Seth, in those future reports, could we have information on what permits were pulled and things like that, and status of them?
Yes, certainly we can pull that information and let you know if any permits have been pulled during that quarter. We can make that, we'll talk about how to present that, but we can make that part of our, if it doesn't come up from the property owner, we can make sure we have that information.
Thank you, Seth.
Commissioner Perdue, will the commission have a chance to view the property? When and how?
Sebring, for the record, yes. If everybody wants to send me available dates, obviously not this month because Christmas is coming up and I'll be leaving shortly for a break, but for January, February, or you are welcome to join me on the, hold on, let me see. You're welcome to join me early May. I don't have a date set yet because I have to look at my work schedule to do an on-site inspection. Of course, we can't have a quorum going, but if anybody would like to tour the property with me, please let me know, and I'll get you the date once it's set. And if we have too many people, then we'll just break it up in 2 groups.
Okay, thank you.
Further question?
Thank you, Chair Stodel. Similar to what Commissioner Service requested, more information would be great on like the details of what's been done structurally. The pictures are one thing, but they obviously wouldn't show what other types of improvements have been done to the structure itself. And I'll probably follow up with you, Dr. Sebring, to get a lot more history on the project itself, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's a great point. Over the last 3 years, not a lot of work was necessarily done in each quarter, but certainly we will report on what was done. There's been some discussion on this commission, we can go over this in more detail, about the lighting. There was some work done on the marquee. So we'll update you on what has been done. But yes, that's a great point. We will make sure to update you on all the work that has been, at least the work that's permits are required for. Obviously, if the owner goes in and does painting or cleans up, he'll have to report on that because we may not necessarily know about that. But all of the work that requires a permit that we'd be aware of, we'll certainly include that in our part of the report.
A couple of issues, issue is the right word, a couple of elements. This is an 80-year-old building, and it's had several owners over the period of time. And that includes from when it was a theater to where it became a place where music and dancing took place. The floor is no longer beveled, it's now flattened. Significant changes have taken place inside that the owners are dealing with. Secondly, and these are not in the order, but just some thoughts, this document, this settlement agreement, is unique. It transfers the responsibility from the state of Nevada to the city of Las Vegas, and with that transfer, in this one case, it expands the responsibilities of this panel, the Historic Preservation Commission. Elements that are on the city's historic register, we simply look as a commission at the exterior. In this particular document, it also includes some very specific elements of the interior. Thirdly, when Mr. Dapper took this building over, the previous owners had just let the entire thing fall apart. I had the opportunity to go in there. There were hot electrical wires. The plumbing was leaking all over the place. It was in a significant state of repair and was falling apart. And there were holes in the walls where people had determined that's where they wanted to live for a while. Mr. Dapper his first thing was that he has cleaned up the building and stabilized it and has taken care of all the electrical issues. There's no hot wires hanging from the walls, and the plumbing and all that has taken place. The challenge, item number 5, is the freeze. I'm going to use his name because it's in the settlement agreement. Has Mr. Dapper exercised reasonable diligence to cause significant progress towards rehabilitation? That, of course, is open for interpretation and the challenges that he faces, but there are words significant progress. So those are the things that this commission needs to filter and understand what is going on and the challenges that the owners face and a whole variety of things. In my experience with that building, which goes back well beyond the current ownership, is that mistakes have been made that created significant challenges for the new owners. That said, I think it's incumbent upon the new owners to follow what the settlement agreement says and should have on his own made sure that he appeared all of these times, and the city does not have to take the blame for him not appearing. That said, if there's a motion to approve this, I will support that motion. We need to move on and get things rolling, and I think that the plan, if we could put the chart back up of the schedule. I'm not necessarily looking for a rewording, but these quarterly reports are more than just the owner's report. Those are times, and while there won't be action items, it will be the responsibility of the HPC to go through, however they individually want to do that, all of the elements that are in the settlement agreement that he is responsible for doing. And then we will have the second benefit of the Historic Preservation Officer reporting back to us, has he kept the building in repair, and is he maintaining it culturally correctly? So this, while I agree with the director, We should have had this in 2021. That was 3 years ago. We're going to have it for 2025. We move forward. If there are further comments, otherwise I would look for a motion.
Commissioner Surface, I'll make a motion for approval and for submitting the appropriate and requested items in the future reports, such as the status of permits.
And just to clarify, so we did break this into two pieces. So item 10 is through 2023.
Yes.
Item 11 is for the 1 year, 23 to 24. So I just want to make sure we're voting first on item 10, 21 to 23, and then we'll vote on the next one. So,
We have a motion. Further discussion? General public? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with Chair Soldal voting with those in attendance. Let's quickly then move on to item 11. This is a similar item as 10, except this is for the current year 2024. Dr. Segrant?
Thank you, Diane Sebring, for the record. Correct, this is for 2024. And again, all of the previous reports, and again, it was 3 reports that were given by Mr. Dapper during this year, were included in the backup. So hopefully everybody was able to go over those documents and to make an informed decision. Again, it's the same determination if Mr. Dapper has made reasonable efforts for the rehabilitation. In the February 28th update, he gave the commission updates on the design, leasing, timelines, the financing history, and community engagement. On June 25th, again, the design, the paint analysis as it relates to the tower, the neon sign refurbishment, leasing for future tenants, a change timeline, the history, again, financing, and the impact the project has on the community. And then at our last meeting on October 23rd, he gave us the last update as far as the program, the executive summary programming for the tenants. There was an issue with the cell tower relocation he did speak about. He did talk about and agreeing to the 2025 HPC schedule and the new timeline. And so this is, again, is an action item if during this year he has made those reasonable efforts for rehabilitation.
Excuse me, your mic.
Any question from the commission? General public? If not, look for a motion.
Commissioner Surface again, and follow up to my previous motion, I'll make a motion for approval.
Further discussion by the commission? General public? Hearing none, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with the chair voting in attendance. And just a quick reminder for the record, there is nobody on the telephone? All right, thank you. Further comments, questions? All right.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's move on then to agenda item 9, discussion regarding conservation districts as they relate to the historic preservation initiatives within the city of Las Vegas. Members of the HPC requested a discussion regarding conservation districts. The National Trust for Historic Preservation defines conservation districts as neighborhood conservations that are districts are located within residential neighborhoods and with a distinct physical character. Although these neighborhoods tend not to merit designation as a historic district, they could warrant special land use attention due to their distinctive character and importance and viable contributing areas of the community. The current City of Las Vegas Unified Development Code does not include conservation districts. However, in research, it was an item that has great detail in the 2010 master plan, but is not referenced in the current master plan. The board's packet includes 3 important reports, including a study from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, an article about protecting neighborhoods through conservation district programs from the Preservation Law Reporter, that publication, and a copy of the municipal code as it relates to the HPC and neighborhoods. Dr. Seabrand, something else you would like to add?
Thank you, Seabrand, for the record. So this has been a topic that has been requested to be placed on our meeting schedule by Vice Chair Laramie. So we were able to gather some literature to share with the commission, but there's a lot more out there if you just Google conservation districts. The one point I do want to make is sometimes this gets confused with an environmental conservation district, because there are conservation districts in the state, but those are more for wetlands areas or areas that are for fauna and flora, not for a built environment. So sometimes these are called cultural landscapes. There's often different words for it, but this commission's been calling it a conservation district, so we're sticking with that. But of course, we can change the name if this is something we want to look at further. But we wanted to just start with a discussion. There's no vote on this. This is just to have a discussion about what these are, and could they be something that is done in the city. And again, I hope everybody was able to read the literature that we provided. There are pros and cons, of course, to these districts. As we put into the memo, our current code does not include anything such as a conservation district. It is something that if we find that there is a neighborhood that is historically relevant, we of course try and put it on our put it in the historic district. I think I have more slides here. Yes, we try and put it in the historic district because we feel that if it is qualified and does meet the requirements, it should be a historic district, but we do have other neighborhoods that we have surveyed in the past that unfortunately do not meet the requirements that could possibly meet the requirements of a conservation district. So there are several different cities that have this either as an ordinance or as a policy or as a neighborhood-driven type element, and we just put together a couple of the different cities, the types of conservation districts that could potentially be established. There's a historic preservation model that really is architectural or has historical merit, then it cannot qualify as a historic district. There's a neighborhood planning model. That's as far as like neighborhood level land use tool, and I'm gonna let Mike Howe jump in here in a minute, because we're basically doing that in the West Side with the historic West Side guidelines, guidebook. The guidebook, as far as it kind of partners with formed-based code. And then the things to consider that I hope everybody can think about today, or as you go back over the weekend and over the holidays, think about this, and we can come back at, a later meeting to discuss this further. These do require a high level of neighborhood participation and support, and that has been one of our greatest challenges. Commissioner Perdue can attest to this, as we've been talking to residents over at Spanish Oaks to see if we can get them on our historic district, and we cannot get to that majority of the 51% of property owners to agree. We have gone door knocking in the Cliff Maze neighborhood. Teresa and I did that, and I think there was one person that said they might be interested. So that is really our greatest challenge. We do neighborhood meetings. We do not get a lot of participants at our neighborhood meetings. We do reaching out with social media, like I said, door knocking, door hangers, postcards. We explore every opportunity and every possible way to reach neighborhoods, and we just don't reach the milestones that we need. So that is going to be one of the biggest challenges. So happy to take anybody's suggestions of how we can increase that neighborhood participation. Also, things to consider: it would need a review board. And new municipal ordinance does require mayor or city council sponsor. And then again, how do you distinguish the conservation district from a historic preservation district, and if it's appropriate to designate a residential neighborhood as such if it's qualified to be a historic district. And before we take questions, I'd like Mike to weigh in on what he's doing in the West Side. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, Michael Howe, and what I want to give is just objective material. I don't want to slant it one way or the other, and kind of break down typically how these things work. And so the key thing when we have the Historic Preservation Commission, we have a body that has the review authority on an entity that's determined historic. And so the understanding is, well, what if you have a neighborhood or a block that it's really close to being historic but doesn't qualify. Well, that kind of makes it tricky for us because the conservation district then in effect, if it were to be formed, operates as a perfunctory homeowners association. So you'd have a different entity because the thing that's required is some sort of design review committee, an architectural review committee. You have this entity that oversees and approves if something is conforming to what the community agreed to. And that's kind of the challenging part because we get in a little bit of a catch-22. Well, we'll just use the Historic Preservation Commission for a conservation district, but your review authority is over historic properties. So if it's not historic, then it becomes an entity, and we have those. Symphony Park is one. It has a design review committee, but it's staffed, it meets. And so what we've done with Historic West Side, where it's a little bit unique, you have the form-based code that the zoning standards guide by the context and the massing of the buildings, but it goes into more detail by using what we call a design guidebook. It's not compulsory, it's informative. So that's the key thing. If it was compulsory, we would have to have a design review committee, some form of staffed committee to see if those criteria are being strictly met. So that's kind of the part is if you do a thing that falls outside of the HPC, the mechanism that we look for is there's an architectural review board or committee that approves and authorizes that. And that's kind of the threshold that we have when we meet with neighbors. There's always, us as Nevadans, there's always that little bit of, I'm bound by somebody else's opinion. And so that's kind of the part where we're trying to, what are we bringing in exchange for that agreement? And yes, so we continue to work on how do we preserve communities that may not meet that strict definition of historic yet.
No, I appreciate that, and that makes sense. I mean, the neighborhood conservation district clearly is, maybe the word is more lenient than a historic neighborhood, but this sounds like it's even a little more lenient in the sense it's a guidebook. But still, it's a guidebook. It's something that people would be able to refer to. Any other thoughts? And we'll look for questions and comments. If not, commissioners?
There, I've got one. I know in the case of the neighborhood of Spanish Oaks, the thing that seems to be the biggest snag is that whenever a permit is drawn, the historical commission has the right to yay or nay as to what can be done on the permit. And that frightens a lot of the homeowners because they don't know how extreme that would be, how delayed that would cause the construction to be. And if there was some way around that, especially in a neighborhood that already had strong architectural controls, as long as they were in compliance with what it was that the HPC wanted in the first place, it seems that if that could be avoided, that would be a stimulant to getting the majority of the property owners to approve.
Further questions, comment? Vice Chair?
Yeah, Commissioner Laramie, for the record. So I do have a couple comments, but one quick question about what you just explained, Mike. So I believe, but I don't know for a fact, that NRS does allow conservation districts as part of historic preservation tools. So I understand that it's not currently in the purview of HPC, but is it possible as a long-term goal to change the overall ordinance that governs HPC's kind of regulating power, if you will?
So
I think the simple answer is yes. I mean, we can add it to, but I think we also have to come to the realization it's not only Spanish Oaks to where they, and I think, Mike, you acknowledge that is somebody else is not going to tell me how I'm going to paint my house or change. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. I get that. also get that at the drop of a hat, we can pass through a TID that can come through just like that for any, if it means a potential revenue or getting bonds or whatever. You know, I mean, it's not that this, we all live here, we've all dealt. Some have worked with the city a lot deeper than others. We understand the challenge, but the Conservation District is part of the NRS, and there are ways to deal with that. And there are districts around the state, as Dr. Seabrand indicated, some of them are not historic conservation districts. They deal with water and so forth. But I think what we'd like to do is begin this process, and this is, as I mentioned, was in the 2010 city master plan, the idea and the opportunities that a historic conservation district meant for neighborhoods. It said it wasn't part of the current code, but I think that what we're looking for, at least I'm looking for, is let's get a real understanding about this, and maybe once we have some sense of the opportunities that a conservation districts, and they're not going to force people to paint polka dots on their house, that we can appear on television, go to the newscast, talk to the newspaper reporters, and do various things in order to move this idea forward, either as individuals or as a group that we support an ordinance of this type. Nothing that says that we can't have an action item saying this is a draft of something that we would like to go forward. It doesn't mean the staff is going to have to go knocking on doors and demanding or whatever. We can simply approve the concept of a recommendation, and then we can go out and sell it. It's not draconian. I mean, this is something that just makes things a little bit easier and would make Las Vegas a better place. That's my personal opinion, and having only really read the documents that Dr. Seabrand brought forward. So, Michelle?
Commissioner Perdue, one additional comment is evidently HOAs have not been in the past designated as historic preservation properties. And possibly the HPC needs to come up with some criteria that would be separate and apart from how you would analyze houses or a particular home or a particular neighborhood, where you have the independent decision-making ability to do whatever you would like in there. That could be one step in the right direction. Also, I would like to comment that if you do have a conservation district, that is a baby step for a community to understand what they're getting into before they get into an actual historical designation. So that is a good intermediate step.
Commissioner Laramie, so agree with those comments. And I also just wanted to, I guess, provide a little bit of background about why I've been asking for this discussion. And just kind of related to the comment about, we don't always have a lot of community support for historic preservation. Which is true, and I know is definitely hard to pull together, but it has been done, and it can be done. But when I was working with Nevada Preservation Foundation, I did continually receive requests from community members asking if their neighborhoods would qualify for historic designation. And a lot of times these requests would come from neighborhoods where they knew that something had already happened, like in the Huntridge neighborhood or in the McNeil neighborhood, where there had been surveys done. And I would have to respond with the unfortunate reply of, well, unfortunately you weren't found to be historically eligible, but there is a lot of interest in some of these communities who we've already worked with in some fashion, and I think that they may be interested. Granted, that was a handful of years ago, but I think there likely is still interest in some of these areas that already have strong kind of community organization within them going, that there could be potential to move forward in some of those areas on some of these early conservation districts. I also think that, we've been talking about this at the neighborhood level, but this could potentially be a tool for getting more commercial districts designated as well. Generally, I know across the nation, it's very difficult to get commercial property owners interested in historic districts. Obviously, commercial property owners need to be able to update their properties and kind of compete in the modern market in ways that homeowners don't necessarily have to. So I can understand some of their hesitations to kind of a stricter design guideline, if you will. But having a more lenient, and to your point, Diane, system that's kind of already working with what the city is working towards in form-based code. For some of our more historic kind of cultural areas like the Arts District, potentially even the Las Vegas Academy area, I could see these being tools that may be able to bring some community support from those areas who recognize their commercial areas as unique places, but don't, want to go the full step of full historic designation. So I think those are some things to think about as we continue the conversation. I would like to recommend we continue the conversation of what putting together an ordinance would look like. I'm also open to using different language. It doesn't have to be a conservation district. And I guess, during the agenda, the upcoming agenda items, I can make a request to continue the conversation if that would be necessary. But I think just because we haven't seen community support doesn't mean that we wouldn't see community support if we had more tools available for the community to preserve their resources in ways that they think might be more appropriate than what we're offering.
Right, thank you. I would like to, first of all, open up to any public comment, please.
Hi, Amy Raymer. I am with Nevada Preservation Foundation. I'm the board chair. I'm also additionally a member of the John S. Park community. I live in John S. Park as well. I don't live in the overlay. I live outside of the overlay. I wanted to add our endorsement, or add my endorsement in particular for something like a conservation district. When we work with neighborhoods, when we do our programming with Nevada Preservation Foundation, we have a lot of communities that are very polarized and very split. They do not want to be a historic district. They do not want to be told that they can and cannot do what they want to do with their properties, change their windows out, so on and so forth. However, there are a couple right off the top of my head that there is a groundswell in those neighborhoods, and these are neighborhoods that have had surveys, but they do not. There's not enough of them that would be contributing for it to be a full designated neighborhood. That they would be interested in something that would truly set them apart as a historic and honor that historic portion of their history. And so I think that having something like this, to Commissioner Laramie's point, having something like this does allow another opportunity for those to happen. Because right now we've got, Scotch 80s, we've got a placard, the historic Alta area, we've got a placard. In going into McNeil, we've got a placard, but it doesn't mean anything. And, in order to kind of give some of that some credence, I think that there would be support behind that as well, too. Like I said, the number one thing that I hear and the number one pushback that we hear when we talk about historic designation is, again, to your point, we don't want to be told that we can and cannot do what we want to do with our properties. And so having a guidebook that, the community kind of works together, that honestly would help with the understanding of the history of the community as well, too, as part of that. Like, why are these houses designed the way that they are? What are some of the major characteristics? Why, kind of allowing for some of that information to come as well, too, also creates that connection within the community. A lot of these communities already have very active Facebook groups as well, too, that they run things through. Additionally, they do meet, they have neighborhood meetings, they're having large parties, things of that nature. I'm thinking, too, about, Huntridge. I know that Huntridge itself, if you walk through Huntridge, it's, there are some homes that have very clearly, continued to meet the same expectations as whenever they were first built, and they're next to 3 or 4 homes that just have not kept that up. So again, kind of really informing the community as well, too. Why were these homes designed the way that they were? What were some of the major trends in the homes at that time? I think that level of education also helps with that community connection.
Couple, 3 things that we can move forward with. One is, Mike, if the mission statement or the goals of the design book, the general goals of why it was created, what its purpose is, I think if the HPC could get a copy of that, if you could send a copy of that, as well as maybe if the vice chair could find a copy of just a generic conservation district ordinance. I think those 2 things, I mean, it almost sounds like what you're talking about and what you're doing, which was funded, by the way, by the Centennial Commission, is a version of a conservation district in some ways, or at least has elements of it in what you're trying to achieve out there. So I think that's maybe another path forward to formalize that option. If neighborhoods wanted to do that, there may be a way. I mean, I don't have an answer, but it just seems that there's a couple of different answers here to move this forward. And then as far as the Spanish Oaks, I mean, it's almost like there are with HOAs already. I mean, I know our HOA tells us what to do, fortunately. So Vice Chair, this was your item. Any thoughts on how you'd like to move forward with this?
Commissioner Laramie, I think your next steps sound good. I do think it would be helpful to better understand the West Side Guidebook efforts and, what the background is on that. I know that you said that is more optional than like acting as an overlay district, but it would be nice to understand what that effort is about more. I can certainly pull some sample conservation district ordinances. I know, I think it was the preservation law article that Diane provided, did have some examples of conservation districts from around the country, but it didn't necessarily look at their ordinances. And I think, I know this conversation is kind of new for commissioners, so maybe in another,
what we can do
based on the agenda schedule, but it would be nice if, all the commissioners could kind of think about it and do a little bit of research and come back with kind of their own thoughts of whether they think that this is something to consider and would like to keep working on together. I know that if it went as far as creating or modifying the ordinance, that's not going to happen overnight and can be a pretty long-term project. But I think that it's worth keeping the discussion open and pursuing if the commission decides it wants to go down that path.
Well, and I think the operative word is, this is a discussion item. We are discussing it, but it sounds like there's a couple of things that we may want to move forward with, and we can bring them up on the next agenda item, which I think is item coming up. So further discussion on this, otherwise we'll move on.
I just give an update.
Please.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just, well, yeah, to give an update, I'll provide an update on the Historic West Side Design Guidebook. It's still in the draft stage, but I'm going to give the background on the grant request and what it's trying to achieve. What makes it unique than the typical guidelines. And the key thing too, just to echo back what I heard today, and I will talk with Diane over this, is I think there was a couple things that sounded like obstacles, but when you put them all together, I think there is a path, possibly. First off, not calling them conservation districts because it's confusing with what the state has as conservation districts, which ironically is where the SHPO resides, in that same department that administers those. So that's, I think, an easy thing. You'll just call them preservation districts. But they become a precursor to a historic district. So lower threshold, because I think some of the challenges are getting everyone to agree, when I think the first step is, we do the survey, we see what the properties qualify, and then we have that starting discussion of, say, let's, talk about a preservation district while on the path towards getting to a historic district. So I think there's some opportunities, some things that we can share that will distinguish them from the confusion that we're having in our part is, well, if we already have a historic preservation district process, why would we have this independent thing that may be problematic? And I think it's because we're getting tripped over calling two things the same thing when they're actually different.
Right, and I think the goal is there are clearly those districts or those neighborhoods that are historic, and they are still in a shape that they have contributing, so forth. But there are other opportunities to stabilize neighborhoods, and whether it's a design guide that's guidelines, I suspect some people are going to say, to hell with you, I own this property, I'm going to put in a 10-story with a whatever. But I also suspect some people are going to take it very seriously in that neighborhood and see what the oh, that's interesting, and they will use that document. So if there's no further discussion, we'll move on to the next.
Chairman Stodel, I do have homework for the commission. As Vice Chair said, please note down, and I would really like everybody to do this, note down your thoughts on this. Like, how would we differentiate that? How would we enforce it if we don't let somebody build a clock tower on the outside of their house? Do we let them build a clock tower on the outside of their preservation district? I say that facetiously, but it is something that we need everybody's input on. So please, I know it's the holidays coming up, and again, I can't promise this is going to be on the January agenda, but it will absolutely be on a future agenda in the beginning of the year that we can all discuss, and I'd like to really hear everybody weigh in on this.
Well, and I think if we're looking at our next agenda, I don't think we're talking about an action item at all. I just think that we have some discussion, maybe hear from Mike on the designs guidelines, and I don't think we're saying at this point that we're going to have a multi-level draconian process you can't put in a watchtower. I think it probably will lean more towards these are some guidelines for the neighborhood, and present the neighborhood with those opportunities. So anyway, unless there's further discussion, we'll move on, and then we'll look at where we can ask for additional or future agenda item material. Okay. All right, let's move on then to agenda item, I think I've got 13, or 12, which would be the awards. And this is a action item. This is something the board commission has been looked at.
Excuse me.
It is 24-0623 HBC 1 Discussion with possible action regarding approval of the Historic Commission's annual Excellent in Historic Preservation Awards. As you're making your presentation, Dr. Seabrand, one of the things that I didn't see in the packet was, I think we discussed the issue of how we would vote, and I think we felt that the votes need to be turned into the staff rather than have it at a public meeting. But I'll let you go forward.
Seabrand, for the record, thank you. Yes, so the decision was to, once we do have any nominations come in for the commissioners, to just relay, can do so anonymously to staff so we can determine which ones are going to be voted on. So we do have the requests were incorporated into the nomination form, which is part of the backup. The Dorothy Wright Bricks and Mortar we did add adaptive reuse to that. And then in honor of our late Commissioner Colleen Beck, we have the Colleen Beck Archaeology, Paleontology, and Indigenous Ethnography, and that is to include projects and programs dedicated to the preservation of artifacts, fossils, and the documentation and analysis of Native American culture. And so we just need a vote on the approval of the new categories that the commission will vote on, will first submit and vote on nominations for our May Historic Preservation Month.
How do we handle the vote process? Do we need to vote on that, or is that, in other words, we send the nominations into you, you send the nominations out to us, and we send them back to you with our vote? I mean, this is a discussion regarding the nomination form, so maybe we can only talk about the nomination form.
You mean on today's event? I mean, sorry, today's item?
Yes.
Yes, so today's item is only to approve the nomination form. Because we don't have in here the guide or the regulations for how the vote is conducted. We just have that.
Is that something you could give us next meeting?
Yes, we can do that.
All right. Any further questions?
Yeah, Commissioner Grimmer, I just have a process question. So this is just the nomination form, and then at a later point, we would get a lot more details on the project, because I see there's a 250-word max. It doesn't say anything about photos or any of those types of submissions. 250 words seems pretty small to describe a project.
Well, Seabrand, for the record, so we can send you the past nominations so you can see how they were composed, because they don't have a lot of narrative. Because a lot of times it is somebody, career achievement, professor at UNLV, and the achievements they have made with publications or teaching or anything that is towards education to the general public, or a building that used adaptive reuse, such as the brewery on Main Street that was a car garage was adaptively reused into the brewery. And so those don't take a lot of words. We've never had anybody submit a picture, but anybody is welcome to. Like I said, most of these are for individuals rather than buildings, but photos aren't prohibited. We've just never received any of those. But I think you'll get I understand this is your first meeting, so if we can meet later, also we can go over this more in depth, and I can give you the examples of what has previously been nominated.
Thank you. All right, look for a motion.
Commissioner Surface, I'll make a motion to approve the form as presented to us today.
Further discussion, general public? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with the chair voting in favor. Now we have item 13, which is 24-0624-HPC1. This is a report on from the Community Development Department regarding the HPC's budget. Dr. Seabrand?
Thank you, Seabrand, for the record. I don't know how clearly you can see this, but we have all of our projects here under the project title, the grant amount, what has been paid, remaining balance. Keep in mind that these are not up to date today because things are always a little bit behind by the time we get to our meeting from when we prepare this material. So right now, the commission has spent about $51,605, and we have still outstanding 36,000 of those, again, are projects that are not finished that we still are going to be paying on as we move forward in time. And the balance right now is $71,154.03.
Question, comments? This is simply a report. Thank you, Dr. Seabrand. Next one is item 14. This is an action item. This reflects the meetings for 2025. Notice that there are other dates beyond the third column where the meeting is held.
Excuse me,
Chairman Stark.
Chair. Could you please read the item?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is item number 14, 24-0625-HPC1, discussion for possible action regarding the approval of the 2025 Historic Preservation Meeting Schedule. This is, as I say, an action item for the coming year.
And Seabrand, for the record, so again, we do meet the fourth Wednesday of every month, except we don't have a meeting in November. But if you see that there's an asterisk next to the April meeting, that's because Chambers is occupied during our normal meeting. So that is a different date. So that is on April 30th. So please make sure you note that. And for those of you unfamiliar with the how the meeting schedule works, the pre-application submittal date, you don't have to worry about. That's for when somebody's going to submit a certificate of appropriateness application. They need to get it to me by that date, so I go over it with the applicant, make sure that everything is there that needs to be there. And then for any grants or certificates of appropriateness or designation for it to be a historic property, submittal closing date, again, that's nothing you need to worry about. That's for us. That's when it needs to come to us. And then the only column you need to really be concerned with is Historic Preservation Commission meeting. Make sure you show up on that day. And the last column, last day to appeal decision, this is usually on certificate of appropriateness applications. If the commission, let's say, denies application, the applicant is able to appeal that decision to city council, and they have to make that appeal to the city clerks by the date in that column. So again, just concentrate on Historic Preservation Commission meeting date column.
Please, question.
Commissioner Grimmer, just a comment. I will be, just for staff and for the commissioners to know, so you all don't think I'm being a slacker, I will be in Carson City for all of the legislative sessions. So for those meetings, February through May, I'll be attending them virtually.
All right, thank you. This is an action item. Look for a motion.
Commissioner Lair, may I make a motion to approve the proposed 2025 meeting schedule?
Further discussion, general public, commissioners, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with the chair voting in favor. Now, let's move on to agenda item 15, 24-0626 HPC1. This is a report, not an action item. Report for the Community Development Department regarding the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the Path Forward Conference that was held in New Orleans, Louisiana. Dr. Seabrand.
Thank you, Seabrand, for the record. And just before I start, I'm going to actually ask the commissioners that attended to weigh in here, but for the commissioners that did attend, just know that the expense reports are just being completed, so you shall be getting a check from accounts payable sometime before the end of the year. So we did attend this conference, again, a very, very good conference, learned a lot, and I'm now the one that needs water. So there were a lot of tours on this one, which was really great to get out and look to see how, obviously New Orleans is very different than Las Vegas, but there were a couple of cultural landscape tours that were very interesting. New Orleans doesn't have a lot of new construction, obviously, because they have very strict historic district guidelines and requirements, but there was an infill spot where they did show us that there was a long battle with the developers to make sure that it was retained at least the look of the French Quarter. And it was just really interesting to, again, look to see how they differentiate from Las Vegas, and again, the cultural landscapes. And anybody else that, Commissioner Gillespie, Levine, if you want to weigh in on your experiences as well?
Commissioner Gillespie, for the record. I echo what Dr. Sebring said, but one of the things that I particularly enjoyed in comparison to Las Vegas, New Orleans is very tourist economy dominated, and so it's a destination in much the same way that we are, and I think that they brought that out in a number of the on-site led tours. I also appreciated, and I don't know that it's something that we've addressed here, would address here, but there was a fair amount of restoration and preservation of different religious sites, and different, that also had a cultural component. And so I really enjoyed getting to see how they got the community and/or congregation buy-in and made, tremendous effort over, sometimes uncertain time periods to accomplish something, and in some cases rebuilt some of their membership.
Oh, there it goes. Hi, Jack Levine for the record. Let's see. The first thing that struck me was we walked right into the middle of a Swifties concert, and we were just surrounded by thousands and thousands of little girls in shiny dresses. It was pretty weird. I tell you, I'd seen it in the news, but I never had experienced it up front. Most of the time that I was there, we were actually spent on tours. I did a tour of the churches and holy places that was really fascinating. Churches that go clear back into the pre-Civil War, and I did 2 walking tours of the French Quarter. The thing that struck me most, the difference between here and Las Vegas, was there's actually a massive cultural tourism component to New Orleans, where we're just trying to get one going here. People come to Vegas for other reasons, but people go to Vegas to see the French Quarter and the food and the jazz and the architecture, and they've really done a stupendous job. There wasn't much in the way of workshops this time that were actually hands-on, learn something. A lot of congratulatory, success story type seminars, but not necessarily the how-to. So anyway, it was a great experience, and I'm glad I went.
We do have to remember that New Orleans is just a little bit older than Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and well, that's great. Any of those, they're all opportunities, and it's glad that HP is able to fund the staff and the commission to attend these and bring back their experiences. That all helps as we move forward, and Las Vegas gets a little bit older. I don't know if we're going to catch up with the French Quarter. Further comments, questions? All right, then let us move on. Item 16 is a report from Seth Floyd. Is anybody going to handle that? Mike?
For the record, Michael Howe, I do not have any updates coming from Seth.
All right, then let's move on to agenda item 17, a report by the city's Historic Preservation Officer, Dr. Sebring, updating items on the HPC's active project list. Dr. Sebring?
Thank you, Sebring, for the record. So SHPO was still reviewing the Cliff May homes, and I am sorry, I finished my water, so I have a bit of a dry throat here. The Old Mormon Fort, We did hear the update for the second draft today. SHPO is also doing their review. The West Side School National Register update, they weren't able to get it on the January agenda, so it is on the the December agenda. It's on the March 25th Museums and History Board meeting. The Floydland Park Historical Report is in progress. I did meet Katz Environmental out there on November 20th, and for those of you who don't know, Kristen Brown, who was the SHPO CLG liaison, is now working for Katz, and she's working on this project. So, yeah, so we have Zoanne and Kristen both working on the Floydland Park project, which is great. The 1433 Cottonwood Place, the individual house in the Huntridge neighborhood, it did pass the Planning Commission review, and it will be on final review at the December 18th City Council. In the Huntridge neighborhood signs, I think they have installed some of them, but we're still waiting for the final installation, and this is Public Works doing this installation. I have not heard one person or have received one email from anybody that wants to participate in the parade. I mean, if we don't have to, but again, if you want to participate in the parade, it's on May 10th this year. Please let me know. If we're going to have a float, need to start working on it now because May's going to sneak up on us pretty quickly. And then the only other thing is, since this is our last meeting of the year, just want to wish everybody happy holidays. Thank you.
A nice postcard. And I think the postcard was produced by Burkett Distributing Company of Las Vegas, and this is from 1948. 1948. It's when the Chamber of Commerce held a contest at Las Vegas High School, and Charleston became the Alps. The Desert Alps is the name that won. A couple of three things. Could you go back up to the slide in progress? The slide in progress.
I'm sorry, say it again?
Could you go back to the slide that,
Oh, yes.
PowerPoint, whatever the proper term? In progress, that means we funded it and they're working on it? For Floydland?
Oh, yeah. This is the historical report that what the commission funded, yes. To do the in-depth historic context.
Yes. Can you know off the top of your head when the first draft may be coming?
Oh, I didn't bring my schedule with me.
Okay, but I mean, we may be the next 90 days?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. Further questions, comments? Please.
Commissioner Purdue, no comment about that. Just wanted to comment about the snow picture. That ski run was in Kyle Canyon, not Lee Canyon. It was prior to any kind of a rope tow, and it was just north of the original lodge. The platform there was for jumping, and you literally had to walk up the hill in order to ski down it.
So that's Kyle Canyon, huh?
Yes.
All right. Always great to be able to specifically identify. All right, let's move on then to the next item, which is item 18, 24-0627, HPC1, report by the Community Development Department regarding historic and archaeological resources and local media. Some great material there. I point you to two specific items. On the first is the steps forward setbacks for the Huntridge Theater. That's where the challenge with the telephone pole is mentioned, and Mr. Dapper indicated that it may delay the rehabilitation process. We'll look forward to an update on that at our January meeting. The other one is the Neon La Concha move, request delayed. The request delayed was in large part because there are several documents with the federal government, the state government, and including the Centennial Commission that the neon La Concha shouldn't be moved again. But there was feeling at the Centennial Commission that a lot of those could be negotiated out, and that decision, request for funding, will come up, I believe, in the May meeting of the Centennial Commission. But it's interesting a story to stay on top of.
And Chairman, for the record, the last item on there is the fire destroys Las Vegas Barbecue Restaurant, historic site. That's the
Yes.
Moles Meats. So I did talk to them. It's not the restaurant itself. It was the grills behind the restaurant. So the historic structure is fine.
Okay. And the plaque?
It's still there, yes.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to HPC agenda number 19, discussion for future topics. For items, comments made during this portion of the agenda by individual members of this commission shall refer solely to proposals for future agenda items, and any discussion should be limited to whether or not such proposed items are within the purview and/or whether such proposed items shall be placed on a future agenda. No discussion regarding the substance. Two questions. One is the vice chair requested that, again, a simple discussion item regarding the broad topic of conservation districts, including a potential report by Mike on design guidelines that direction. And also, I would like to be able to have an action item to vote on the process for voting on awards for the HPC award process, which takes place in May. Other questions, comments? Hearing none, let's move on to public participation, which is 20. For the record, there are no members of the public in the audience. So we will move to the next agenda item, which is adjourn.
Did they get the parking thing fixed?
The parking thing was not working.
Yes, stickers.
Who has stickers?